Can you imagine standing on the edge of time? Standing at the end of 1 year and looking into the possibilities and promise of the next. We're seeking for wisdom from traditions different from our own this month, and today we're exploring a very specific season and specific story within Judaism. Jews around the world will celebrate their high holy days over the next couple of weeks, beginning with Rosh Hashanah tomorrow evening, extending through Yom Kippur the following Wednesday. This begins the new year for Jews, and spiritually it's a time to stand on the edge of a new beginning, to imagine the possibility of a world made new and one's own place in it. It's a time to reflect on where you've been and to make right what has been wrong, to practice teshuvah, the turning or returning of the soul to the wholeness that will allow for that fresh start. Rabbi Sharon Brous says that in order to transform the soul of the world, we must first be willing to transform our own souls. A world of peace and justice will come only when we journey from the self outward. In order to begin to bring healing to the world, we must first sing the song of the soul, a song of pain, of loss, of triumph, and fulfillment. There is a very specific sound associated with this time, with all of Jewish worship, but especially sacred during this time, that captures that journey of the soul. These are the several calls of the shofar, the ram's horn. There are different ways that the horn is sounded that capture that journey that we make from the wholeness of our birth through the brokenness of learning how to live in this world with all of our flaws and heartbreaks and tragedies to a wholeness greater than we ever could have imagined. The first sound of the shofar is the tekiyah, a single steady note, whole and clear, symbolizing the wholeness we all possess at birth. The next sound is the shevarim truah, 3 stuttered notes that rise in tone, the shevarim, followed by the teruah, 9 short staccato sounds like an alarm, symbolizing that brokenness that we feel as people torn this way and that. And finally, the tekiyah gdolah, technically the big tekiyah, which lasts 10 seconds at a minimum and is the symbol of our ultimate wholeness, salvation. Another rabbi says that rabbis tell us that if a person has to decide whether to go to synagogue where there is someone who knows how to pray wonderfully but not hear a proper shofar, or to go to a different synagogue where she can only hear a proper shofar but the prayer service is lacking, she should go to hear the shofar. That is because the shofar is the central, most important and dramatic mitzvah, or blessing, of the day. So though we aren't in a synagogue at the moment, we are covering all of our bases here at First Parish this morning, and we've asked to have a proper shofar with us. So we're grateful for Paul Cooperstein's willingness to be here, and we sing ourselves into our story with Hashivenu, hymn number 216. Please rise in body or spirit. We'll sing it through in unison 3 times.
A long time ago, at about this same time of year, a senior rabbi known as Israel Baal Shem Tov chose one of his student rabbis for a great honor.
Rabbi Ze'ev, I've chosen you to blow the shofar this Rosh Hashanah. Now, in order to do this right, you need to study some kavanot, some writings about the shofar. These are instructions for how to prepare your mind and your heart to offer the right intent to a holy act. And you'll need to have those writings in mind when you do the blowing during the service.
Rabbi Ze'ev was both excited and nervous about this task. He was excited because it was a great privilege to blow the shofar. He was nervous because it was also a huge responsibility. So Ze'ev earnestly studied the kavanot writings just as his teacher had instructed. From them, he learned the meaning of the shofar's 3 sounds and how they can impact the people who hear them. And as he read the kavanot writings, he made notes on a piece of paper. When he finished, he put the paper in his pocket. That way, he could remind himself of what he had learned once in the synagogue on the big day. Finally, after a lot of studying, the great moment arrived. It was the morning of Rosh Hashanah, and Rabbi Ze'ev stood on the reading platform in the center of the synagogue, in the midst of the Torah scrolls, surrounded by a sea of talit-draped bodies and under the gaze of his teacher, the senior rabbi. An awed silence filled the room. Everyone was waiting for the climax of the day, the piercing blasts of the shofar. But when Rabbi Ze'ev reached into his pocket, his heart nearly skipped a beat. The paper with his notes had disappeared. Furiously, he tried to remember what he had learned. But in his shock over losing the paper, he could remember nothing. Tears of frustration filled his eyes. He had disappointed his senior rabbi, who had entrusted him with this most sacred task, and now he could only blow the shofar as if it were a mere simple horn. Heartbroken, Rabbi Ze'ev blew the 3 sounds. Ze'ev tried to avoid his teacher's eyes for the rest of the service. After the prayers were over, the senior rabbi made his way to the corner where Rabbi Ze'ev sat crying.
God Yom Tov, Reb Ze'ev. That was a most extraordinary shofar blowing we heard today.
Humiliated, Ze'ev began to stammer a reply, but his teacher interrupted him.
In a palace, there are many gates and doors, leading to lots of big halls and chambers. The palace keepers have great rings holding many keys, each of which opens a different door. But there is one key that fits all the locks, a master key that opens all the doors. Each of the kavanot writings that you studied are keys. They each can unlock one door in our souls. But there is one key that unlocks all of the doors, a master key that opens the innermost chambers of the divine palace. And that master key is a broken heart.
When you picture someone who's deeply connected with the divine, someone very godly, what do you think of? Do you think of someone who's peaceful, who's kind, who's generous, who's loving? Do you usually imagine someone with a broken heart? Someone who feels defeated, embarrassed, ashamed, betrayed? I sure could have used that information, that key to the divine chamber was a broken heart, a few times in my life. The first one I can remember was so big to me that I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was back in what my son likes to call olden times, when I was 10. And like this morning's story, it had to do with blowing a horn. Mine was a clarinet. I had just learned to start to play it, and I really loved it. I was also really, really shy. So shy that I wouldn't correct people when they pronounced my name wrong. So shy that the thought of playing a song at the first recital made my palms sweat and my knees buckle months ahead of time. The day of the recital arrived, and I had practiced madly for it. My song was My Favorite Things, and that song indeed was one of my favorite things. It was winter, and I had chosen my very favorite church blouse, a long-sleeved burgundy blouse with a lace collar, and my first ever pair of corduroy pants, off-white. I thought maybe that if I looked really good on the outside, it might hide the complete terror on the inside. Now, the way the recital worked, each of us students waited in a practice room outside the main room where the recital would be held until it was our turn. So parents and teachers and siblings were all waiting outside for us. We didn't hear or see our classmates' performances. We just waited to be called next and stand and deliver. It was not an ideal arrangement for a shy 10-year-old girl. So I sat in my practice room, shaking so hard I could barely even hold on to my clarinet, what with the sweaty hands and all. And I was almost relieved when the student teacher came to tell me it was my turn. Almost. So I made my way down the short hallway, my legs feeling like spaghetti under me. And I walked into the room, and I heard them announce that Parissa Parsons would be next. I saw the music stand in front of me, and I was sure that when I put the clarinet to my lips, it was not going to be air that came out of my mouth. I got myself situated at the stand, got the music onto the stand, and suddenly my mouth was dry as a bone. By some miracle, air did make its way from my lungs, through my mouth, and into my horn. And I made it about 3 bars into the song before squeak! Oh, please let this not be happening to me. Keep going, I tell myself, just get through it. Squeak! Only this time louder and really no way to cover for it. And suddenly I felt like every single note I played was wrong. I lost my sense of timing, if ever I had it, and somehow I managed to get through the last bar before I ran from the room. Ran from the room. I was so full of embarrassment and shame, so humiliated at how terribly I had done, I couldn't imagine anyone wanting to see me again. This might be a good time to mention that I could be a little dramatic. So I ran through the school to the farthest hallway that I could find and just cried. I remember someone trying to coax me back to the band room, saying stuff I didn't believe about having done a good job, and it was my first time and I should be proud. But I couldn't find a way back to pride through all that. All I could feel was broken. Now, if something like this hasn't happened to you yet, you may be grateful. But I'll tell you that if you're really living your life, it's bound to. And not just once. A loved one might die unexpectedly or too soon. A friend may be untrue. A lover cheats. We fail a test that desperately matters to us. And in the moment of discovery that what we had leaned on for support, whether it was another person, an idea about ourselves, or a set of rules about how the world should work, in the moment when we discover that that thing that we had leaned on as our rock is no longer there, our hearts break. If only my 10-year-old self had had the Baal Shem Tov to tell me that this was a sacred moment. I probably wouldn't have believed it for how terrible I felt. But here's the thing. In that moment, I had to search for who I was and what I meant and what the world meant when things didn't turn out the way I wanted them to. I had to look right in the face of my own limits and see that there was something bigger than me. I had failed, and the world kept turning. I was shocked to realize that no one else thought that my performance that day was at all remarkable. The pointing fingers and stares and laughs that I had imagined, the talking to from my teacher, the dishonest compliments from my parents, never came. Everyone else thought it was just fine. What I didn't know was that Josh, who had played his trumpet before me, was incapable of rhythmic counting. And no one could really tell what tune he was playing. And Leslie had practically deafened folks with the high-pitched squeal on her oboe. And Julie played her piece so painfully slow, everyone practically fell asleep. So my squeaking through my favorite things was very much in line with where my classmates were. I am pretty sure that Baal Shem Tov would have said that this was a holy moment. I had been thinking and striving for perfection, for having the notes come out beautifully and in due respect for the song I was playing, just like Rabbi Ze'ev. Instead, what came through was where I was, a beginner, working hard and letting it show. What came through was who I was, and it was enough. Here's the deep truth of this story for any life of faith. All we can ever do is fully come, open with who we are, where we are on our journey, and our best effort from that place. Our hearts do break when we know that that place where we are is not where we want to be. But they also open to a wisdom we can't get to when we think we're on top of it all, that we have the power to control it. And when we're in that broken-hearted place, from the loud, alarming, stuttered shofar cries of our brokenness, we also look around and see that though we feel distant from our hopes for ourselves, alien to the ideas that we had about how we should be or how the world should be, we are not alone. And that clear, pure, strong song of the single note of healing, of wholeness, begins to sound. The practice of teshuvah, of turning during the Jewish High Holy Days, is usually practiced through repentance and forgiveness. Those are important things. But there is also a turning that happens with this broken heart, a turning to the wide open arms of the infinite, the holy, of God. A sense that our own smallness against the vast universe of things we can't explain or understand. And we never turn to it with quite as much passion as we do when our own answers don't work. These are called the days of awe, and that seems like the right response to the fact that in our turning, in our not knowing, in our need, comes healing. The key to the divine is opened as we begin to see the ways that life continues after our loss, whether it's of a person or an idea. In life itself and the ways that it goes on are more blessings that become more obvious and abundant than they ever were before. In that desolate place, there's the consolation of life eternal, ever-changing and unchanging at the same time. If we make it far enough into that assurance of life, we also get the comfort of community in the way that we find each other in our sorrow and find new life by sharing our pain. That is exactly what church is for. Not for all of us at our shiny best, as much as we love to be there, but for the moments when we've reached that place where there's no choice but to turn, to give ourselves up to the sacred story and say, I cannot do this alone. A church full of people who can do it alone doesn't last very long, nor do they have very good potlucks. Our faith shares with Judaism the conviction that revelation is continuous, that the Holy still speaks through our lives and through our stories. So this morning, I invite you to bring to mind one of your own stories of that heartbreak, of that disappointment, of that brokenness. Consider a time when you faced the limit of what you could do, when you wanted so much more, when you lost something or someone precious to you and thought you couldn't go on. Remember where you were, what was happening around you. When you have a story in mind, I invite you to take those cards and pencils and write a few words or draw a picture that reminds you of it. And we'll give you a few minutes to write while Jeremy plays the cello.
I've been coming to First Parish for over 10 years, since my two children, Andre and Emma, were small. I've taught in pretty much every grade in RE, most recently our 7th grade Neighboring Faith program. And I just got certified to teach Spirit Play, which is the program for our 1st and 2nd graders. I've been on our RE committee for a long time, and now I just became a member of the parish committee. When Parisa asked me to share for a couple of minutes a reflection that ties to what First Parish means to me, I was extremely intimidated. 2 minutes is a very short time, given how important this church and my relationships here have become for me. But when she made the connection to Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and suggested that there might be a family connection for me that I could talk about, that seemed manageable. I come from a mixed family. My father, who died 2 years ago, was Jewish. My mother is Christian. We went to Reformed Jewish temples, and first to a Methodist church with a very progressive minister who preached social reform, and where my mom directed a rhythmic choir which consisted of women in white dresses dancing around the sanctuary. Then we went to an Episcopal church. But the real focus of my family's religious and spiritual life was our family and the extended circle of diverse friends that our parents gathered to us. In thinking about what to say today, I realized how my comfort at First Parish comes from how much I feel at home here. That has a lot to do with how my family operated. Like First Parish, we had rituals, very important rituals, but no creed. We welcomed diversity and discussion. We had a Christmas tree and a menorah, that's the Hanukkah thing, that my dad had made himself out of pieces of wrought iron. I still have it. I have hung my grandmother's cross collection on it, which says a lot about how I feel that these different strains work together. We didn't regularly attend temple services on Friday nights. We had our own Sabbath service at home. That was the one night we were all required to be home and to stay and have dinner with the family and have our whole evening with the family, at least until my brother became co-captain of the football team. And then he got dispensation to go out after dinner. But after Sabbath services and dinner, always the same menu, hot bread, steak, and salad, we read the Bible, a chapter of the Old Testament, a chapter of the New Testament. We took turns reading. We made our way methodically through the books in order, skipping nothing. The plum assignment as a kid was to have the chance to read the long lists of genealogies from the Old Testament with their obscure and tongue-twisting names. This family practice is why I think I know more of the obscure parts of the Bible than many, and I've had a good repertoire for the gory Bible stories workshops that we've offered as a choice in RE to the kids at times. We celebrated the Jewish High Holy Days by taking the day off school and going to the dunes at Lake Michigan. We had a Passover Seder, like here, from a script my dad wrote himself. We all had parts. Like First Parish, we even had our own film night, where my parents would set up the projector in our living room and invite friends to view obscure foreign films and weird allegorical cartoons that still disturbed me. This was sometimes confusing for us kids to operate in multiple worlds. When we went to children's events at the temple, there could be embarrassing gaffes. There was the time that my mom packed a bacon and peanut butter sandwich for my brother to take for lunch at a temple function. Bacon, for those who do not know, is not a permitted food, even in the most loosely observant Jewish setting. And worse, he didn't like bacon and peanut butter and tried to trade it. Okay? Then came the time in December when the rabbi exhorted us kids to call out their favorite holiday, expecting a chorus of Hanukkahs, and I yelled out oblivious Christmas, okay? Embarrassing. But all of this is why I think I'm so much at home here, and why I think I have a hard time even being anywhere else. I did try to go to an Episcopal church as a young adult, and I even dropped out of my work for a semester to try divinity school, to pursue a PhD in religion, but I just couldn't. I cannot. I don't feel right reciting in unison a creed with others that I don't fully believe. I just can't do it. First Parish feels like family to me. We don't all think the same. We have rituals. We have no creed, other than a covenant to work together and to respectfully pursue our own collective and individual truths. Another piece I value very much is being in a community where I'm pushed to take on more, to volunteer, to contribute to a community whose values and goals I believe in, to be around so many people I admire and to try to follow their examples. At this time, which is a time, Rosh Hashanah, of repentance, reflection, and new beginnings, this has helped me reflect on what First Parish means to me. A strong, supportive community that feels like family, a sense of acceptance, a welcoming of differences, and the challenge and support to do better.
We know that there are just as many stories as Allison, just as many profound stories as Allison has shared. And in the spirit of those stories and the spirit of working together, we now give and gladly receive the morning's offering.